Welcome to the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast, which exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations. I'm John Frank, fellow entrepreneur and the owner of Third Road Management. And with this podcast, we will connect with a variety of experienced and dynamic individuals to shed some light on both the art and science of entrepreneurship. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors. First, my very own Third Road Management, a company that brings fractional CFO services to small and mid-sized organizations by revolutionizing the CFO suite. We'd also like to thank Two Hound Red, a brewery and restaurant located in Glen Ellen, Illinois, that is focused on creating classic, innovative beer and food. And finally, we'd like to thank NWC Media, which provides inbound marketing technology, project workflow management, and efficiency consulting to organizations of varied sizes, who is also the producer of the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast. Andy Hayward, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. This is really, really exciting. I'm looking forward to diving in today and having a great conversation. Good. I usually start out each episode just by setting things up as, what this podcast is about, who's it for, and thank everybody for, kind of tuning in. But the mission statement is that the Drive-By Entrepreneur Podcast exists to bring current and compelling content to entrepreneurs and influencers of small to mid-sized organizations, right? So every guest has been someone that's either an entrepreneur themselves or interacts with entrepreneurs like me. In my case, I'm actually both. Because I'm an advisor to businesses, but I'm also an entrepreneur myself. But it's all this like inner web of people that have different experiences, bring good, interesting insights to the table. Sometimes they're just inspiring stories. And it's a little bit of everything, from time to time.
Right.
But I love it, because I love entrepreneurship first and foremost, but I love stories and I love just learning. So anyway, thank you for being on here. You and I have known one another for, I think it's about 7 years or so. When we haven't been in softball fields in the early days, done a little bit of golfing here and there, but also just raising a couple of young women that are in the same grade. But when I thought of you originally, and the original message that I sent you about this is like, thought of you through this lens of being an entrepreneur, right? And I'm like, I know what he's gonna think. He's gonna think, but I'm not really an entrepreneur. But I'll explain it in this sense. I feel like I know your story, I know your background, or at least some of it, and I'm excited to unpack more of it. But when I think about it, I think about like your story is very similar to an entrepreneurial journey, and that along the way you've taken these calculated risks or calculated, I'm going to go do this when, the world tells you to zig and you zag,
right,
kind of thing. And a lot of your story is consistent with that of an entrepreneur in that way. And I think that, people will find inspiration from it in terms of, following their dreams in some ways. So why don't you kind of just walk us through your career progression, because I think that will set up sort of the conversation for the episode here. Yep.
Yeah. I started at a young age, I guess, just sort of dreaming about doing this. First and foremost, I've never had a dream of being on the downstage side of the curtain. It's always been behind the scenes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But I can remember as young as, 14, helping my buddies who, guitar and drum kit, and helping them with wagons, carrying them, down the street to whose ever parents would let them play and make noise.
Yeah.
Moving on to filling stuff with my, gear into my mom's station wagon, driving to, VFW halls or bowling alleys or any other place that would allow, teenage kids to play punk rock music. But and then just it really carried on through college, just having a deep love for live music, um, and then just sort of hanging out and trying to learn, just from observation, what was going on with the bands behind the scenes, who was doing what, um, and just went out on a limb and asked, a not a friend, but an acquaintance I had made through music, if who was in a traveling band, um, if they needed any help, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I finished school and jumped in their van and started, traveling around the country, much to the confusion of my parents.
Yep.
But, they supported me. And
And around what age is this here? 'Cause I'm trying to time up
right,
your
uh,
schooling and
I was about 23,
okay.
22.
Okay.
And, and I just said, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. And, I want to sort of at least see it through for a
Yep.
little while. And they like, great, go do it. So did that. And that was eye opening, growing up in the Midwest, didn't travel much as a kid, um, you know, sisters' college trips, you know, a couple, spring breaks here or there, but really getting out on the road and going to all these new places was just really eye opening. Um, and I just, I fell in love with it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Not knowing how to do it, but I knew I wanted to do something with it. And so I just kept with it. Came back I moved to Chicago, and I was sort of bouncing around doing the internship thing.
What's like?
Small labels.
Oh, okay, but
yeah,
in the industry.
yeah, just trying to whatever I could grasp.
Yeah.
If it was music related. Couple small, record labels, booking agencies, things like that, and really doing the grunt work that no one wants to do.
Yep.
Breaking down cardboard and hauling it to a dumpster or whatever, in exchange for free records and concert tickets.
Yep.
And then, I was now about 25 years old, and, Death Cab for Cutie came through town, and I had known them a little bit through the other band that I worked with. And I just asked, like, hey, do you guys need any help on the road? I don't know what I could do, but I could, carry a guitar from stage to the bus if you need that. And they said, yeah, let's try it out. And if it doesn't work out, no big deal. We'll get you a bus ticket home. I was like, fair enough. And just went out and just sort of, there was no set, guideline to this job.
Well, right. It sounds like they were probably relatively, newer as a band, right?
Absolutely.
And this was a job that didn't really have a description. It was more like, yes, we can use some extra hands.
Right. So in that respect, I sort of created my own job.
Yep.
And I did the first, week, and I think they said, hey, this is great. We'd really like it if you, continue on. And so I did. And that's really, it sort of hit me like, wow, this is crazy. Like, this is actually like a job.
Yeah.
And because it was always just fun before. And I was like, okay, well, I'll do this for a couple years, and then, I'll figure something else out. And, after that first tour, I was just so amped and just, I wanted to do it again.
Yeah.
Granted, I was quite young and I had no significant relationships, and nothing holding me back. So I was just like, yeah, let's go, just do it again.
And this is what year-ish?
2003.
2003. Okay.
And so we did a 6-week tour, and I was, at the end of it, I was just like, let's go. Let's just pack it up and do it again. But I was so excited, and that's really, the time where I was like, wow, this could be something. And so I really got into it even more and really carved out, a role for myself, and through the years have progressed, and and doing basically everything, not necessarily everything great, but at least tried to do everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And now I've been in the same position as a tour manager for the last, about 14 years.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
and yeah, I really, I attribute to just sort of the dream and desire to do this, mixed with a lot of luck,
Yeah. Right.
and being able to take that luck and turn it into something legitimate. So,
Yeah. That's great. I didn't know that when you were in high school and stuff like that,
oh
that
yeah,
you were still,
sure,
supporting your buddies, that you were never the onstage guy. You were always the
always
off stage, but just enjoyed it
right,
as much as they did,
100%.
and that's great.
I have a picture somewhere of, four of us, walking down the street with a, Marshall amplifier in a, red Flyer wagon, just like who didn't have driver's license, but yeah, always, it's just always been there. And
Yeah.
so when this opportunity came along, I just sort of jumped on it. And
So you did the 6-week tour,
Mhm.
and then did you right away just okay, this works, let's
Yeah,
keep going,
let's keep
or
going.
okay, got it.
And then that was, yeah, the year came to a close, and then 2004, I went to Europe for the first time, and that was super eye-opening.
Mm,
I'd been there once, for like to London for, a week or something like that. But I had never been to some of these smaller countries and all the cities, and just got to experience that. And that just further,
yeah,
um, just put more wind in my sails to just figure this all out. So,
yep. And I mean, seeing the world, enjoying the music, but it's also because of the event based side of it. I mean, every night is a new night.
mhm,
You know what I mean? And it's like at the end of it, you're like, did this work?
right,
You know what I mean? Did it all come together? And you've done enough times now that, you probably don't, um, you probably have the boxes checked a lot that, you probably aren't as stressed every single time that you were, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but still, I have to imagine that every experience is a unique experience. It's a new venue, new city, new equipment, perhaps, and it's all going to come together. So it's
right.
the thrill of it, I'm sure, is exhilarating and rewarding at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
I mean, I keep coming back to it. So,
yeah, you're still here, right? All right, so I usually have a couple of different themes that I like to hit on in each episode, and we've kind of been dancing around the first one anyway, so we'll just go right into it. But the whole idea is following what you believe in,
right,
right? And I shared earlier that some of the things that I like to bring to the show are like, inspirational stories, right? And I jokingly brought this book for you because a couple years ago, um, I had this epiphany of third road management and what I do, basically helping strategy, finance, operations for like these small to mid-sized organizations. And I had this moment of being like, well, what if I could take this and apply it to something that I love, like music, right? And help these different bands or groups or whatever, help them thrive, right? And we sat down and had coffee, and you were like, okay, good news, bad news. Bad news is a lot of that happens years back, like your start, right?
right,
And the journey where there's a lot of not easy days, and finding the groups to work with and stuff like that. Those relationships start very, very early, right?
right.
And I was just like, oh shoot, well, I don't think I got it in me at this point in my life to, go down to the metro or, the different venues down in the city and build that up. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, you're like, but there's this outstanding book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, that, I've gotten through some of it. As you know, it's a little thick,
Right.
as far as information goes, but, the endorsements here, Quincy Jones, Rick Rubin, Jimmy Iovine, like if anybody is like, how does that work in music? This is what you're like, this is your, your source of information, so to speak. Um, but anyway, so my heart was a little bit broken, but that's okay. But what was it like at that point in time about, the specific band? I know you said you had it in you a little bit, but you're kind of taking a calculated risk, right? With jumping in with a specific band,
Sure.
right? So like, what was it that was like, okay, I know it's time for me to try something out, like you said. Like, what was it? What was building up inside of you at that time that you were like, this feels right?
I think it was, I didn't know what else to do. Like I was so focused on accomplishing this without any blueprint or idea of how to.
Yep.
I think I just felt like I have to do this. I have to see it through. I have to at least try. I'd rather try and fail, and say that, well, it didn't really work out, but at least I know I tried. Um, and so that was really the driving force. But yeah, again, like to your point earlier, I definitely don't view myself as an entrepreneur, but I do recognize that I sort of had a dream and I just sort of followed it and tried to, make it work as best as possible.
Right. And I imagine that, look, there's just different, everybody's got slightly different personality, right? And that's that like inspirational side of this is like, imagine yourself, right? Back then, say there's a kid that like would pick this up, right? Like nothing necessarily is going to happen without taking some amount of risk.
Right.
Right. And that's where like if you wait for all the I's to be dotted and all the T's crossed and everything to be perfect, it's never going to happen.
Right. No.
Right. But like seeing the opportunity, being excited about the opportunity and having the courage of being like, I've got to go do this and it may not work out and that's okay.
Right.
Right. I saw a lot of that in, your story, in our conversations and things like that. And I just think that that's really important, you know what I mean? And that can apply to anything. Even,
sure.
We have kids, right? Like I'm sure they have, their own dreams and, I'm sure you agree that, you try to give them encouragement that one day that they should go,
right.
Take some risks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, well, that's great. Love that. The second sort of thematic thing I wanted to talk about was, navigating through challenging times. And, we talked, I'm sure there's a lot of things. The thing that's like staring at me most glaringly is the pandemic.
Sure.
Just because, touring in particular got shut down. But I'm sure there's other, obstacles along your journey, right? Because it's now been, a long time since 2003, right? 20 years that you've been at it, right? Every organization has a different way of sort of navigating through those challenging periods of time, right? So like, what have you found has been, a good way for you guys through that? Like, how did that all play out?
Speaking, for myself, I think, when faced with challenges like that, especially in the field that I'm in, it's just a part of the journey. Yeah. And I think it's just a part of, how the story is just going to be better. Thankfully I haven't faced too many, extreme challenges
Yeah.
in terms of what I do. But that also would, keeps us on our toes too. Like if everything is perfect every day and there's no change, it gets a little monotonous, a little boring. So
Yeah.
a few challenges here and there, it keeps us everyone's on their toes, and it's fun in some regards to navigate and overcome those.
Mhm.
And we can look back and be like, oh, do you remember when, or do you remember this, like remember how we missed that flight and the show was, whatever. Not a good example, but so that just, I think that's just all a part of the journey. COVID is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
I just, of course, we were the first to shut down our
Yep.
industry and one of the last to reopen. And in 2001, bands were dipping their toe in the pool and just be like, all right, like,
Right.
let's see how we can do this. We'll travel in a bubble, right? We'll test, we'll do all of these things. Completely different than what, business as usual.
Right.
And it was challenging because there was no playbook. There was no
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
It was just, no one told us what to do. Like people popped up, advisors and whatnot. Well, this is how, you should play this out. Well, it was helpful, but like for the first time, I would say in 18 years at that point, there were moments where I was just like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how we're getting out of this mess.
Yeah.
Like this is beyond me. This is beyond, the organization. This is, a global epidemic,
Right.
Pandemic that, like, I don't know what to do. Like,
Right.
do we just send this person off? Like, do we keep going? Like, who's paying for, there's so many questions.
Yep.
So many questions. And each time you got to one point, then that just brought up another question,
Yeah.
So the pandemic was just crazy for everyone.
Yeah.
And some people did better than others, but in how they navigated that, it cost a lot of money, for
Yeah.
these bands to, and I know, and we can talk about this if you want to later, but like, it's, like what the fans don't know sometimes, it's like why ticket prices might be the way they are, how the band's making money, whatnot. It's like they spent a lot of, personal money, potential revenue on, protections just so they could go tour.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely in my career, and I would assume most, not that we're that unique, but like the pandemic was definitely just insane. So.
Well, and specifically in your role, I mean, you're tour manager,
right?
So you're talking about, I mean, everything from airplanes,
yeah,
to hotels and different restrictions. Any of those things are, 5-day or 10-day or whatever, different points in time, waiting periods,
right?
Contact rules. I mean, just
yeah,
a litany of stuff, let alone, how do you pull off a concert,
right?
Where everybody's got a social distance, like how the heck are
Yeah.
the lighting guys and sound guys gonna, I cannot even imagine the logistical.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
But and I think you just do what you can do to be safe.
Yeah.
And then just honestly just really hope, but I think they've also, we've gotten to a point now, or even last year, where it's just like, okay, well, there was more of a guideline, like if, A happens, then this is the procedure. If
Right.
B happens, this is the procedure.
Yep.
But starting out in 2021, there was nothing like that. It was all very wild, wild west.
Right.
Of navigating how we're all going to do this. So.
Well, and I got to imagine that, if it was 2003 that you first got going, that, 17 years of shared life and experience goes a long way towards, working through.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And trust and camaraderie and,
right.
All that kind of stuff, go a long way.
Totally.
And in that organization, in any organization, right?
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think about that, and it's a different context than say some other business might be, but everybody always is going to be met in the face with challenges, and it's
Right.
like, you got to just find a way,
Yeah.
right? Find a way through.
Yeah.
Um, that's great. Other subject I wanted to talk about just a little bit is just like this idea of, the business of music, right?
Hmm.
And, I know you're on one end of the equation, right? In terms of tour management, but it's also, I just think it's an industry, despite, maybe the accessibility of, a book like this
Sure.
or documentaries and stuff like that. And we've talked about some of those things, but it's like this area that not a lot of people know about, right? So I thought it'd be fun to just like something about the industry that most people either don't understand or maybe they're not aware of, or they
Right.
misinterpret. And like you just brought up ticket prices, but anything like that stands out to you that
Right.
is kind of like behind the scenes kind of thing.
I think just talking with friends, um, in Glen Ellen, not that are not in the industry. The one common question is, you know, when these bands come and play United Center or something like that, Wrigley Field, um, that they're carrying all of the gear.
Yeah.
I had one friend say like, I can't believe the United Center had all of that gear for the band to use. Just sitting like in a storeroom somewhere. Like, well, they don't. That's why the bands travel with it all.
Yeah.
And every day it gets set up, and there's you know 20, 30, 40, 100 people working to build this show
Mm.
in about 6 hours. Um, and then at the end of the night have it torn down and packed into trucks within 4 hours.
Mm.
So um, that's a massive part of my job in our industry, is just the logistics involved, and the timing, and how are we going to get the show up and running by 7 o'clock tonight,
Yeah.
and then down and on to the next city.
Yeah.
So that's sort of just for me, just like a funny, like, oh well,
Well, and I think that look, the outsider of me,
right,
right, being naive is like, well, a stage is a stage,
right,
speaker is a speaker,
right,
light's a light, what's the difference? You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And I think I know enough to know the different nuances of
right,
that, right? Different sound equipment, right, is going to, put off different sound.
sure,
Depending on where you place it, it's going to
right,
put out different sound, like all that kind of stuff. And then the same thing with the lighting, and how one group uses lighting is going to be totally different than the way
right,
another group does, or LED panels, or whatever it might be, right?
right,
Like, you and I have talked about like the Killers, for example, who I love, but like they've got a whole
yeah,
show that
right,
is a show within the show kind of thing. You know what I mean? But everybody does,
right.
you know?
Well, I think to the best of my knowledge, when the touring industry really started, say in the 70s, aside from a few bands come to mind, like the Grateful Dead or something like that. Um, I think, the most of them would really only travel with like a guitar,
Okay.
or drumsticks,
Yeah.
or, and everything was sort of provided locally. The lights were, already in house, or they came from a local party provider or something like that.
Yep.
That's also the time when, bands were touring to promote the record that they had put out.
Yep.
And now, obviously, with the way that we access music, that's changed. So now it's like the show is sort of, it's flip flopped. So you have to be different. You have to be bigger, because that's where you're making a lot of your money, is on the
Yep.
road. And so, with each big band going out and doing their production, it's just pushing these designers and these bands to do more. And be more exclusive and unique. So I think that's like the changing in that industry and how it's gotten to this point.
And do you think, I mean, was there like a somewhat clear line there, that was drawn between, this happened, then that happened, kind of thing, like as digital music sort of like became more and more prominent and the economics shifted, people just like, okay, now we need to invest in this in a new way. So it's like a
Yeah,
pretty linear relationship, you think?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bump with digital music.
Okay.
But when digital music was overtaking, physical sales, that I'm sure there was a jump in that line of live production. Um, unless you were like a Rolling Stones or U2 or doing a stadium act and had all the money in the world to put on these elaborate shows.
Yeah.
But trickling down to some of the smaller bands, I would assume, yeah, like late 90s, early 2000s, it really just sort of took a jump up.
Yeah. The other sort of similar question, and again, doesn't have to be necessarily your area of expertise, but when you think about the industry as a whole, what are some of like the most interesting question right now that nobody necessarily has an answer to, kind of thing, that's lingering out there in terms of like the future of the industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anything sort of come to mind that is unique and interesting? And
I think, especially coming out of the pandemic, the amount of music out there and the options are just, it's overwhelming. At least it's just to me as just like a fan
Yep.
of how many shows there are. And I understand why. It's because, these bands didn't have the opportunity to make money for, almost 2 years.
Yep.
But, I remember right when the pandemic started, I remember reading a quote from Jeff Tweedy at Wilco, and he had said, and I'm totally paraphrasing, but something about how when we come out of this, it's really going to hurt the smaller bands, the bands that may have moved on to bigger rooms and to playing to more people, because there's just not going to be availability for them to showcase their music. Which is, I think, is true. It's just there's so much, as a consumer, you can only, you might go to a show once a month or something like that. But, if you're young, maybe out of school, just first job, something like that, like to be going to paying $50 or 30, whatever it costs, it's just, you probably just can't afford it. And there's just so much out there.
Yeah. So you think that just the sheer volume of opportunities for people to attend a live show
Right.
is significantly higher now than it was
Oh, yeah.
pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And some of that you're saying is attributable to trying to play catch up
Totally.
for years lost.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then I think that, trickles down to the availability of, employees,
Yep.
Vendors,
Yep.
just supply and demand. There's not enough to go around.
So
and I think I personally know, like people who, when the pandemic hit, it was just sort of like a, not a calling, but sort of like, okay, well, you know what? I think I'm done, and I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a teacher, whatever. And so that's just less and less people available.
So I guess the question marks are sort of, let's say that for the groups that are playing catch up to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
how long can they continue to run that fast?
Right.
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 And then I think what basically you're saying in there is there going to be a generation or a time lapse of that we're just going to miss?
Yeah.
Really talented groups.
I think there probably are a few. It's tough, as a small band, and if you can't make it, and you don't necessarily have that security or
right,
adverse to the risk, like it's tough to keep going.
Well, and you're not making money off record sales. The way that music is being distributed,
Mm-hmm.
right, is different now than it
Totally.
ever was. It's like direct to consumer in a lot of ways,
Sure.
right? So you're not necessarily being found,
Right.
as readily, kind of thing. So yeah, I could see, like if you've only got so much bandwidth, you can go for so long, eating SpaghettiOs and
Right. Sleeping on
living,
floors. Yeah,
yeah,
for
sleeping on
sure.
floors and whatever. If that extends out another 3-4 years, I could see people,
Yeah.
or
So I
three
think,
4 years longer than it otherwise might.
yeah, I just make that assumption. I don't know, no one's going to know who we missed, but I just have
Right.
a feeling that there's going to be a few that we will miss
Yeah.
because of this.
Any underground, bands that you love that you feel like haven't, hit the heights of their um,
Not yet.
stardom.
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm sure they're out there,
Yeah.
but
I'm just curious if you had one that was, in your music that you're like, I can't believe that they haven't, hit it
right.
big. All right, cool. And then last subject, just whatever, any favorite stories, just because I'm, be fun to ask, that throughout your career, if you got any one or two or whatever, just anything, unique, interesting, that, comes to mind when you think
Right.
about your experience.
I thought about this a little bit. I think, for me, the most fun, like exciting thing about all of this is just the camaraderie I've had
Yeah.
with not only, the direct band that I work and travel with, but just all the crew, all the promoters, all um, the people I've met through this, just that camaraderie of understanding what everyone's going through because we're all going through it together.
Yep.
Um, and, you know, it's fun for us now, 20 years on to sit back and, say like, oh, well, do you remember this?
Yeah.
Or try to play the memory game. Like, no, it wasn't, you know,
Right.
it wasn't that, it was this, it was that show, not that show. And that's why, one of the reasons why I just keep coming back is just the camaraderie with the band and crew.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a client that's in the event production,
Right.
business, and they do large corporate events. They've
Mhm.
done some music stuff, but large corporate events. But he always talks about how, so much of what they do is dependent upon other people,
Right.
and it might be they were doing a show in Italy or Switzerland
Mhm.
or Australia or something like that, and they've got to have people in their network
Right.
at all of these different places, like good sound engineers and good lighting people,
Right.
and, trustworthy sources that it's unique in that way, right? Where you have so many people that are interdependent upon one another, and that like your reputation, right, goes a long way, right?
Totally.
Have you treated people right? Have you been enjoyable to work with? All that kind of stuff. Like when you were talking about that, that's what came to my mind is like the number of people you've had to sort of interact with over years. And I'm sure you guys created great relationships and a lot of memories
Absolutely.
in the time doing it. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I really loved, chatting with you about
Thank
this.
you.
Like I said, I hope it's been fun,
Yeah.
right? But I also, hope that, at some point in time, somebody, listens in, watches whatever they're going to do. And maybe they're like, you know what? Why not? Let's take a shot at this thing. We do end our shows, our podcast episodes here with 3 final questions. Same ones. We'll switch them eventually. But you're on the hot seat now. So there you go. All right. Besides this podcast, any favorite one you have? And if you're not a potter,
Right.
that's okay. Any like audiobook or something like that?
I would say I listen to 2.
Okay.
One is pretty popular, Smartless. We've talked about those guys.
Yep.
And the other is an old one. It's from Wisconsin radio. because I
Ooh.
remember it when I was a kid, because my mom always had Wisconsin Public Radio on in the car.
Okay.
It was called To the Best of Our Knowledge, and it's now a podcast. It used to be a radio show you could tune in,
Okay.
but just interesting, stories, and sort of in the vibe of like This American Life, but like science, industry, whatever, art. And I still listen to that one.
Okay.
Um,
It's still like the same people?
well,
Or
no, I mean, people have retired, and
okay.
it's been on for
They just taken the
years.
title and
Yeah,
adapted it.
yeah, taking the title, continued with the themes.
Yep.
But it's a good one. I like that.
To the best of our knowledge. All right, I like
Mhm.
that. All right. Well, this one's not a great one for you. Best concert you've ever been to, but I'll split it into two different ones.
Oh,
right?
I've got an answer.
Oh, you do?
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right. Fire away.
Fortunate enough to attend um, a show called the Bridge School Benefit.
Okay.
So Neil Young and his wife Peggy founded a school in Northern California for students with, verbal difficulties, physical disabilities, and Neil would host a benefit concert for however many years. And it's fortunate enough, the band was invited to play, and it's all acoustic. So everyone's got to play acoustic. And the day that we got to go, the lineup was just phenomenal. I don't even imagine a lineup like this today. It would just be insane. But if of course, it was Neil Young and Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews Band, Foo Fighters, Trent Reznor playing an acoustic set with a string quartet, Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys,
Okay.
Jillian Welch and David Rawlings, and Death Cab for Cutie. And it was just, amazing. Like, watched every artist, which I normally don't do.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's today still the best show I've ever been to.
And what was the venue for that?
Shoreline Amphitheater.
Okay. Where's that at?
Like in Bay Area.
Okay.
So like San Jose, San Francisco.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
You were quick to say.
Oh, that
you had an answer.
Maybe I've been asked that question a lot, so I have it sort of banked in my head to come with
well,
a response.
Well, that's actually a good. I didn't think about it that way, but let me flip the script on you.
Yeah.
Any particular venue that that the band has done a show at that you've been like, holy cow, this is amazing, or or I'm sure there's a bunch of them, but anything that sticks out, or
sure, and it's not very original, but Red Rocks is still not, if not the best, one of in the country, in the world. It's just so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely played a lot of sort of bucket list venues, and it's been cool to be a part of that. And it's another part of the job that's great. You get to go to all these places and learn the history, and fortunate enough to maybe like take a tour or something like that,
right.
And find out about the organ in the basement, or the secret swimming pool on above the room, or something like that. So that's been really fun.
I bet. I've been to Red Rocks. It's open to the public.
You're right.
During the day.
Yeah.
So
yoga
I
classes.
just went there. What's that?
They have yoga classes sometimes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people were definitely like running up the steps.
Oh,
and things like that. But you can go inside, and there's a lot of like the history stuff about Red Rocks and things like that. And I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just like learning about it, and I can understand why it's a destination place for people to experience.
It's great.
It's beautiful. And, all right, very, very good. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
A place that you've been that everyone should visit one time, or at least one time.
Oh man, I love New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a great place.
Any particular city or
all over? North Island, South Island, they're all just magnificent. I mean, if you've seen them, if you've seen, movies like, uh, Hobbit, or all those
Yeah.
Peter Jackson movies, like they're all filmed there.
Yeah.
It's just breathtaking. I just love it there. The people are so kind.
Yep.
And I don't know, New Zealand's my favorite, and it's really far away.
Yeah.
Like
It is really far away.
it's on the other side of the world, and it's
like a plane ride is like almost a full day, right?
oh yeah, it's far.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that like feeling of like, wow, I'm really far from home.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is great. I've got tons of places. I
Yeah.
love Japan. I love, little villages in Germany, things like that. But if I were to stick to one, I would say New Zealand.
New Zealand. All right. Well, Andy, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
It's been
John.
a blast, man.
Yeah, thanks.
I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll catch up soon. Thanks.
Absolutely.